welcome you all to the fifth webinar of Zoho QEngine 101 series. In today's session, we'll be looking at API testing with Zoho QEngine. Just a quick recap for someone who is joining new and also for someone who has been attending the previous webinars. So it started off with the first webinar. First webinar was all about test creation and management with Zoho QEngine. In test creation, Zoho QEngine offers no-code, low-code, and pro-code options for creating test cases. And for managing all the test cases that is created, you have the test modules. And in the second webinar, we actually looked at the test execution, whatever test cases we created in webinar one, and furthermore, the executing all of those test cases and the analysis of all the test cases that was covered in the webinar two. And third webinar was dedicated specifically for web testing. So wherein in web testing, we actually tested web applications and the workflows with the web, revolving around the web application. So we actually looked at how to test the web application and also how to run the test cases on different environments. So that was specific for web application testing. And the previous session, the fourth session, was mobile application testing. So whatever we did in web application testing, the same workflow, we kind of like pulled it towards mobile application testing as well. We use the same workflow, but for the mobile application pertaining to the same application, web application. And this was for iOS and Android platforms. And finally, in today's session, we'll be looking at testing the APIs. So before we get started, let's have a quick look at the agenda for today's session. We'll be starting off with understanding the analysis of APIs, the importance of APIs altogether, and why it is necessary to test these APIs, and what is the role APIs play in the applications that we use in our day-to-day life. And next, we'll be looking at the issues that we face with testing the APIs. So when a tester is actually testing an API, what are the major issues the tester comes up with? And then we'll be looking at Zoho QEngine. Okay, so how does Zoho QEngine help with API testing? So we'll be starting off with how does Zoho QEngine help with creating API requests or API calls, and then how does Zoho QEngine assist with the API responses that you get for each of these API calls. And then, of course, to understand all of the theory that we actually see, we'll be discussing like 3 use case scenarios to understand how APIs are used in real world cases. And finally, to collaborate all of this together, package all of this inside the product demo, wherein we'll be seeing all of the things that we are discussing right now, and throughout the session till the demo part, we'll be seeing all of that in action inside the demo. Okay, so let's get started. Let's start off with understanding the importance of APIs. So before we get into understanding the importance of APIs, I'll just throw in a number here. Just the APIs, when the money which is being made from APIs is more than $5 billion US in market size. So that is just a number that we are talking about. It's not like an application. It's not like a full-fledged application or a full-fledged software. It's just an API. So when we talk about businesses selling APIs and managing APIs, they're able to make this much money just from the APIs, selling the APIs. And this does not include the use of APIs in application. So what do I mean by use of APIs inside the application? So all of the applications that we use, let it be your web application or the applications in your mobile phone, let it be your banking application, or you're watching something on Netflix, or you're purchasing something on Amazon, or ordering food via Zomato or Swiggy or Uber Eats. So all of these applications actually have APIs working in the backend. So an end user will not be interacting with the APIs, or will not be worried about the APIs altogether. So they are performing certain actions, and the developers and testers ensure that the actions or the responses or their requests are transferred efficiently across servers between platforms in such a way that it's easier for them to take care of the necessities. So that is just a crude way of putting it together. But an actual understanding of APIs is APIs essentially help with the data transfer between services. So, what is data transfer between services? Any application that you pick these days has an integration with multiple other applications. So, it could be servers, or it could be another third-party application, or it could be with the integration with some other service altogether. So, the data transfer has to happen. Like, let's say you want to fetch your bank balance, and you enter your banking application, and you want to see your credit card statement, or you want to check your balance. All that you have to do is like raise a request or click on a button. So what happens is your data is pulled very fast, and you are able to view that data, and all of that happens backend. The data is pulled from secured servers in a very secure way. So APIs help with that. So when I say data transfer between services, it's not just normal data transfer. It happens in a very secure way. So the other thing is APIs, just like software as a service or SaaS, there is something called as the API as a service, and this is what I was talking about when I say API as a service. So there are companies and there are businesses which actually just sell APIs. So not every company is okay with building or creating their own APIs and then managing them and everything. So what instead they do is they opt out for APIs which are already available, so they can just make use of it. They can just get it and make use of it. So these APIs, of course, is easy to manage for the businesses, but also the companies running this APIs as a service, they charge for each API calls and so on. So in such a way, they are able to make a lot of money, and that is the number which I talked about at the initial of this session or this slide. So APIs essentially take care of the CRUD operation. So when I talk about servers or talking between the servers, APIs take care of the CRUD operations. So what do I mean by CRUD operations? And I believe most of you know this. So create, read, update, and delete. So whenever I'm talking about data which is stored on a server, and you want to perform the CRUD operations, let it be create a record, new record, or read the data from the records, or update an existing record, or delete an existing record. So all of this, this is just I'm just talking about the servers, but that is very effectively done using the APIs. And the one of the most important thing about APIs is it helps with automating the task. So when someone has to do things manually, let it be an application, and most of the times you might notice that you are actually scheduling something in advance, like you want to send a mail in advance, or you want to book a ticket in advance and something like that. You just preset it in such a way that the API will take care of the rest. So when you preset it, and the API, I'm just giving you a very simple example. So the API will take care of the rest. Either the data is sent already, or the API call will be made at the preset time, so that your automating happens. So that is an easier way of looking at it. But at a larger picture, when we see companies running huge businesses and servers across the globe, so they want their tasks to be automated in such a way that it's easier for them to do it without manual intervention. So in those scenarios, APIs are very, very important. And finally, APIs are customizable. Like, let's say you are creating an API, or you are purchasing an API from a company, you can actually customize it based on your business requirements, and based on that, you can proceed with the APIs. So when I talk about all of this, and I mentioned all of this, but APIs are nothing but application programming interface. So the name itself suggests that it helps with interfacing between servers or applications and so on. So, what are the challenges a tester or a QA team faces with testing an API? So, I've just listed out a few things here. I didn't go deep into all of this because there are a lot of other important things we need to discuss today. So, I'll just quickly go through them one by one. So, what are the challenges that testers face? So, when we talk about API requests, let's say you are creating a record using an API request, and you want to update that record this is just one example. So before you create a record, you cannot update that particular record. So it has to be done in a chronological order. So this is just an easy way of understanding that. So all the API tests, let it be however complex it may be or however simple they may be, these API calls or API requests have to be made in a particular order for them to work efficiently. So the testing has to be done accordingly as well. So it is very essential that the API requests are arranged in a particular order. And now the next important thing is there are multiple clusters of API requests. So let it be if it is like a complex application. So what happens is it's not just a single API call or a couple of API calls. There are sometimes even hundreds of API calls for a particular service to work. So unique API requests for that particular service to work. So what happens is each of these API requests are mostly clustered based on the functionality they are associated with. And the APIs have to be run, these particular clusters have to be run simultaneously or one after the other based on the business requirement. So it is very difficult to kind of do it just like that. They have to plan it perfectly before making these API calls. And when we talk about API requests, there are way too many parameters that one has to deal with in an API request. So there is the body of the request, there is the header of the request, and there are multiple. There is authentication. There are multiple things. We'll be discussing them in a couple of minutes. So there are multiple parameters that are very essential for any API request, and also there are components of the API response as well. So all of that has to be taken care of. And finally, since I mentioned it at the beginning itself, an API is not something an end user will be interacting with. An API is something a developer and tester will be, mostly the developer will be working on it and the tester will be testing it. Or sometimes even the developer itself will take care of the testing of the API request. So what happens is you need to have an understanding of what the API does. What is the purpose of the API? So without the knowledge of understanding what the API does or what is the purpose of that particular API, it's very difficult to test it thoroughly or test it properly or to ensure that it covers all the scenarios. So these are just some of the challenges you can face. One can face with API testing. So now enter Zoho QEngine. So how does Zoho QEngine help? So before we get into how does Zoho QEngine help with API testing, so since this is the last session of the webinar 101 series, so I'll just quickly go through the important features of Zoho QEngine. Zoho QEngine is a test automation tool which helps you create test cases for web, mobile, and API platforms. So for all these three different platforms, there are three different ways you can create the test cases. You have the no-code recorder wherein you can actually create test cases just by performing the actions inside your application. And then there is the low-code builder, and finally there is the pro-code editor. So low-code builder is nothing but simply dragging and dropping of the actions from the left-hand side into the editor and also rearranging the lines within the code. These are available inside code blocks. And finally, the Pro Code Editor helps you create test cases from scratch. And since Zoho QEngine, the coding or the syntax used inside Zoho QEngine is very similar to Java and JavaScript, any developer can actually even can pick it up, or someone who is skilled enough to understand these programming languages can go out for the Pro Code Editor mode. So now that you have created test cases, you have to store them somewhere. So the test cases that you created can be stored inside the test modules. So test modules can showcase or show you all the different test cases that are available inside your particular project. So now each test file, this is the important feature of Zoho QEngine. Each test file within Zoho QEngine can house up to 4 different test cases or for 4 different platforms. So within a single test case file, you can create a test case for web platform. You can create a test case for iOS, and you can create a test case for Android. And finally, you can have multiple API requests within the editor. So all of this can be done with a single click inside the Zoho QEngine's text editor. So once you have the test cases and you have created them, you can run your test cases across multiple platforms. Sorry, multiple, of course, yeah, multiple platforms across multiple environments. You can run your test cases on cloud, which is Zoho Cloud, which is free to use. You can just straight away run them, run your test cases on them, or you can opt for the local agent. The local agent will give you access to install an agent on your system wherein you can run test cases on your own system. This is very, very helpful for mobile testing, wherein you can run it on simulator, iOS simulator and Android emulator. And finally, there is the hybrid option wherein you can opt for running your test cases based on your requirements on cloud as well as local systems. And when you are doing all of this, when a test case is there, you and the test case is created and you're running that particular test case, sometimes what happens is you might be facing broken locators. The self-healing AI feature of Zoho QEngine will ensure that there are no flaky tests involved. And finally, the parallel testing will ensure that you can run multiple test cases simultaneously on Zoho QEngine. So these are some of the important features of Zoho QEngine. And finally, once you have executed all of the test cases, you can view the results of all of these test cases in a single place. That is the results dashboard, wherein you have access to all the test case runs, and you can also look at the screenshot logs of the individual test cases, wherein you can actually look at each line, what happened to the particular test case, did it pass or where did it get stuck, and so on. So these are just the some of the important features of Zoho QEngine. We'll be discussing more when we get into the product demo. So now, how does Zoho QEngine help with API testing? So for API request, Zoho QEngine gives you the option to have multiple API requests in a single window. So one after another, you can create API request. You can populate the fields for all of the components of the API request one after another, wherein you can execute all of the test cases in the same window. And also, you have other features like not just the components of the API request, not just the body or the header or the authentication part, and so on. There is also the option for assertion. So when I am running a particular API request, I'm making a particular API call, and I'm expecting a particular response for the API request, an API response. So in that response, I want to check if this particular data, a part of a data, or it could be the status code, and there are multiple other options. If that is present, so assertions will help you with that. So assumptions will ensure that your API is performing as per your demands. And also, Zoho QEngine helps with the continuous testing based on the variables. So continuous testing is nothing but when you are running a particular API request, and once you get a response, from the response, you can actually pick a particular value or a part of the string or something like that from the API response itself, and you can push it as the input or in the subsequent API request. So in a way, you can actually perform continuous testing one after another. And finally, API requests also have the option for connections. So what happens is, once you create a connection with a particular platform or a third-party service or an integration with something else, once that is done, you will be able to perform multiple API requests without worrying about the authentication part because the connection is already established. So this is very, very recommended for scenarios where you might want to try out multiple API requests. And once our API requests are done, we will be looking at the API responses. So Zoho QEngine gives you a detailed analysis of the API responses and of course the results of the assertion that I talked about, the results of the assertion, and you will be able to take care of the variables inside Zoho QEngine. I mean, the part of the API request, API response, you can store it inside variable and you could uh, uh, paste it as a part of the API request in the subsequent API request. So these are just some of the features. Of course, there are many other things. We'll be seeing that in action when we get into the demo. So before we get into the demo part, I just want to say that Zoho QEngine is a very good Postman alternative. So Zoho QEngine can help you with test your API calls, and you just simply want to make API calls and check if your API is working just fine. You can actually use Zoho QEngine instead of choosing a platform like Postman. So before we get into the product demo, we'll be looking at three use case scenarios today. First, we'll be looking at an e-commerce website that we already have built. So within the e-commerce website, we'll be making an API call to that e-commerce website, and we'll be checking a particular data. We'll be making a small assertion and checking if the assertion is working just fine. And for the second use case scenario and the third use case scenario, we already have an application built on Zoho Creator. So we'll be accessing the records on Zoho Creator within the application in Zoho Creator. And of course, we will try to add a new entry to the application within Zoho Creator as well. So these are the second and third use case scenarios. This will be explained much better when we get into the product demo. So this is how our product will the overview dashboard of the product will look like. So as soon as you enter Zoho QEngine, you'll be invited with the projects overview, wherein all of the projects that you are enrolled in will be available here. So in this case, it's just showing two for me because I'm not a tester. So if you are a tester, you'll be working on a multiple projects, and all of that will be visible here. So you can click on it here, and this is the overview dashboard of Zoho QEngine. So this will show you the overview of the entire project. So all of that is available here. It will show you the data of the subsequent the runs, test runs which are scheduled in future, and it will also show you the project health and other important details. So all of that is available here. So on the left hand side, I'll just zoom in a bit. On the left hand side, as you can see, there is the test cases tab. So within the test cases, as you can see on the left hand side, this is where your test cases will be stored, test case modules. And within this test case modules, you'll be creating a test case. As you can see, this is the editor. On the right hand side, whatever you see is the editor, and this is where you'll be running your test cases. So for Zoho QEngine, as I mentioned, there are three different ways you can create your test cases. There is the no code recorder. If you click on the record button, you can actually create a test case. This can be done for web and mobile, both iOS and Android. You can actually refer to the previous webinars for that. And of course, there is the builder mode, so wherein you can just quickly drag and drop the uh, actions, frequently used actions from the left hand side to into the editor. And finally, there is the pro code editor, wherein you can actually type in your test, create your test cases. So one good thing about Zoho QEngine is you do not have to worry about installing drivers or packages for all of this. You can straight away start using them. Except for the part where you need to install local agent for running your test cases. For creating test cases, you can straight away log into Zoho QEngine. Since it is a web application, you can straight away start creating your test cases. And for creating test cases for the different platforms, this is the single click switch I was talking about. There is the web browser, web application testing. And for Android, so you can see the actions on the left hand side change. This is for Android, iOS, and finally API. So API is what we'll be discussing. We'll be discussing that in detail in a couple of minutes. So before that, so once your test cases are created, you will be arranging your test cases inside something called as the test suite. So your test cases are available here inside the test suite. You can arrange them however you want them based on the order of your execution. And then inside the test plan is nothing but a collection of test suite. So test suite gives you the option to run your test cases either sequentially or parallelly. Test plan again is a collection of test suite. You can arrange your test suites one after another in the order you wish you wish to execute these test suites, so they can be arranged in them. And also, test plan gives you a lot of access to multiple other things. So when do you want to automate? So automating, scheduling the automating part, and choosing the environment and webhooks. There are a lot of other things with test plans. So for this also, I would suggest that you refer to the previous webinars wherein we have discussed in detail about all of these features. And once your test plans and all of the test runs are done, you can actually look at the results dashboard wherein all of the test executions are available. Just a minute. So all of the, I'll just quickly show you one of the test cases. So all of the test runs are available. So within the test run, what happens is every time a particular test case is run, you will be given access to something called as the screenshot logs. And this is what I was talking about for whenever you are running a test case. So what is happening in the backend? So how did your test case perform? Instead of just giving you saying, hey, your test case passed or your test case on this line your test case failed, you can actually look at the screenshot log to better understand how your test case performed in the real world scenario. So that can be taken care of here. And then, of course, each of the test cases have access to run history. So wherein the run history will show you what exactly happened to the test cases and the number of failures it happened, or the most frequently faced issue with the particular test case. All of that is available here. So this is very, very helpful for you to run a particular test case or to share it with your other teams as well. So that's about the results dashboard. Once you are done with that, you can share it with your team, and also running the test cases or approval of test cases. All of that is based on your project, and that is available inside the users dashboard. And once you're done with that, the last and final part tab that we'll be discussing now is the repositories. Zoho QEngine has multiple repositories. Starting off with the variables repository, variable is nothing but a container for string or values. So all of the variables you'll be using inside your projects are available here. You also have access to something called as the environment variables, wherein each environment, based on the environment, the variable will take a different value altogether. For example, it could be just URL, but based on that URL itself, for a particular environment, the URL can have a different value than what you see here, something like that. So that is your variables repository. And then there is the elements repository. Elements repository has a collection of all the elements, let it be web elements for web applications or UI elements for Android and iOS. All of the elements are available here along with their locators, the different kind of locators that you have for the individual elements. All of that is available here as well, so that you can actually tweak them. And this helps with self healing as well, which I talked about some time back. Again, I would ask you to refer previous webinars for better understanding. And there is the files repository, wherein you have access to all the files that you have uploaded, or you'll be files that you'll be using inside your project. All of the files are available inside the files repository. And we see that most of the applications these days come up with something as the multi-factor authentication. Zoho QEngine helps you test those applications as well. So all that you have to do is configure the time-based one-time passwords inside this repository, so that you can actually test your application when it is needed. And of course, there is something called as the webhooks and all of those things. We have discussed that in detail in the previous webinars. You can take a look at that. And also, there is the agents which help with executing your test cases on your local system. And finally, the tunnel feature will help you with executing test cases which are behind firewall but using Zoho Cloud. So that, I think, that's the entire important things I wanted to talk about Zoho QEngine. So before we get into APIs, there's something I wanted to talk about. So this is where you will be creating a connection. So just remember this. I just wanted to show it to you, because once we enter into API editor, we'll not be seeing this because it's inside that. So you can actually create a connection here itself. You can actually create your connection here, create a service, and you can actually create a connection for multiple services using the options available here. You just need an API authentication key, and you can actually proceed with creating connections from here itself. So just remember that. Now let's get into what we have been waiting for or what this webinar is all about. So let's create a test case. Um, so this, I mentioned that this is for our Zilker Watch website. Oh, sorry, this is for the uh, uh, Zoho Commerce website that we created for watches. It's an e-commerce website. REST APIs on Zilker Watch site. Okay, I've created a test case. I'll close this. I've created a test case. So now the very first thing is to get into the API part. So now I have to create an API request. So before we create an API request, I just want to quickly show you all the important things that are available inside. So here you have option to all of this. You can actually do the, as I mentioned, you have the CRUD operations can be performed here. There is the option for get, post, put, patch, delete, and then there's head options. So you will be entering your URL here and you have the options for selecting the parameters, the multiple parameters, their name and values or the key and values for the parameters can be entered here, and the authentication. So this is where I was talking about. So the authentication is where you'll be selecting the multiple connections. So in this case, you'll be selecting one of the connections here. We'll get back to that. And headers can also have like the authentication part. Like if you don't want to do it from the connections, you can also mention it inside the headers. And the body is where, let's say you are creating an API request and you want to add something to it, you can get it done here. There is the form data, there is raw, and form data will help you with sending files and data as well, so JSON files. So all of that can be taken care of here. And then the assertion will help you with whatever is your API response. Assertion will help you with asserting a particular part of that API response. And as I mentioned, the variables will take care of taking a particular value or acting as a container for a particular value from the API response. So now, so this is where you'll be creating your test cases. And as I mentioned already, you can actually create multiple requests one after another. As you can see, I can just keep adding multiple API requests in a single window. And when I run this particular test case, all of these API requests will be run one after another. So just close this. I just wanted to show that to you. So let's create our very first API request. And thank you all for your patience. We waited for so long. So let's create our very first API request. So I want to get the data the from the Zoho Zilker Watch. Sorry, Zilker Watch. It is built on Zoho Commerce. It's called as the Zilker Watch site. It's a watch site, an e-commerce website. So I want to get the data from the particular website using the API. So where as soon as you see here, I mentioned that it is the URL, but you can see that there is something called there's something inside the braces and there is a dollar symbol there and it mentions API URL. If you do remember, I'll just quickly show it to you. If you do remember, this is the variable that I was talking about. So instead of entering your URL every single time, especially if you are dealing with creating your APIs multiple times, what you can do is you can actually store it inside the uh, variable. So API URL is the variable name, and this is the URL it is housing inside it. So you can actually make use of that. So now let's quickly get to our API request. So instead of entering that, I just wanted to show you the variable features because variable is very, very important as far as creating not just for API. but also for the other platforms as well. Variables are very, very important. Let me just copy the URL. So this is the URL that I was talking about, and this will help me with getting the data from the particular website that I was talking about. So very first thing, I'll create a connection. So now I want to get data from a particular website. So not every website will have an open API. So it will not, sorry, or a public API. So in those scenarios, it is very, very essential to have like a connection. It will help with ensuring that the data is transferred in a much, much secure way. So the Zilkerwas connection is already available. So I'm just going to select that. Sorry about that. I'm just going to select that. Okay. And just for good measure, let me add a status code. So status code, I am expecting a status code of 200. So let me check if this is if this API request will work. Based on that, we will make additions as we move forward. So now once your API request is done, you can run it on um, I'll just show it to you. For all of the platform testing, let it be web or mobile, you have access to run your test cases on Zoho Cloud or Agent. For this scenario, I'm choosing Zoho Cloud. Of course, you can run it on Agent as well. So for this scenario, for APIs, you can run it on Zoho Cloud itself. So I'm running the reset. Yes. So I have run my very first API request using Zoho QEngine. So as you can see, it has provided me with a response. So this is the response which I got. And it says that the assertion also worked fine. You see this tick on the left hand side. So it says that the status 200 was equal to 200. So the assertion also worked fine. And it tells you how much time it took. It took 247 milliseconds. So it gives you a lot of important details. It is the response body that I was showing you. And then there is the response headers, all the data related to your API response is available, and also the API request. What was the API request? As you can see here clearly, it says commerce.zoho.com. But when I was creating the particular request, if you do remember, I actually had inside curly braces, I had API URL, if you do remember that. So we have that instead of the API URL, it took the variable, it took the value. So now this was the response that we got. So now let's quickly understand the response and delve a bit deeper into the particular response. So in this case, this is the response that I got for this API request. So within the response, as you can see here, I want to check the category of the site or the title of the particular site, and I see that it is available inside site title. So watch shopping. So this could be, imagine this to be a business requirement. Let's say you are getting an API response and you want to fetch a particular data which is available inside the response. So it could be JSON. It could be a record from servers, and it is available. Of course, it will be available in most of it is available in JSON format. So it could be like that, and you just want to pull the particular data. It could be a customer's name. It could be the customer's data and multiple other things. It gets much more complicated if if I delve deeper into that. But for the time being, let's understand that this is a business requirement, and you want to fetch a particular data from the API response. So in this case, I'm more interested in this site title. So what is the title of this API? I mean, the JSON response that we have here, the JSON data. So now the very first thing is this is the response. Within the response, I want to get into get sites. So this data which is available here, site title is available inside my sites, and my sites is available inside get sites. So we would want to refer get sites first. Within get sites, I want to access my sites. But within my sites, if you see, you can actually call it a list or an array. because of this square bracket, we see that there are multiple curly braces here. So this is one of the curly braces, and there is a comma. So which means that this is not just the only element or only set of data which is present inside the particular list or array. So there are multiple elements present inside that particular array. So in this scenario, we are more focused on getting the data for site title, which is present inside the very first element or the zeroth index of my sites. So we are interested in the zeroth index of my sites, and within the zeroth index, we have the site title. So that is exactly what we will be doing now. So what we will do is, so I already have it here. I'll add one more assertion, JSON body. I'll copy it here. I'll just quickly show you what I copied. So I am getting into the get sites. If you do remember, within the from the response, I am getting into get sites, and within the get sites, I am looking into my sites, and the very first index of my sites, which is the zeroth index or index zero, so which is what is present inside the square brackets. We are indexing it, indexing the array or the list, whatever you want to call it. And within that, we are referring the key value pair, which is the site title. Site title is the key, and the value is what shopping. So we know what the value is. So we just want to check if that is the case. So it is a string. So I want to check if it equals to that. There are, of course, there are multiple other, let me take this opportunity to show you this as well. There are multiple options to assert your assertions inside Zoho QEngine. There is Boolean, there is the multiple options associated with JSON, and there is numbers and the strings and regex also. So in this case, I'm more interested in checking if it is watch shopping. So I'll save it and I'll run my test case now. Since these are APIs, they run pretty fast, and the time you spend on them is also very, very minimal. And as you can see here, my assertions, both of the assertions worked just fine. So the status code also is fine. I mean, it is equal to what the status code I expected it to be. And also the text matches with the regular expression. So both of them worked just fine. So which is a good news. So that was the very first scenario. So since we are running a bit short of time, let's move on to the next scenario. And I'll quickly create a test case. But this time, since it is running late, kindly excuse me from creating a description. But ideally, it would be better if you create a creator Libri. So this is the app that I created. But it is always better to have a description, a proper description. That is a good practice. But excuse me this time. Get into API. So now you might be wondering, what is this Libri or what is the creator application that he was talking about? So let me just quickly show you that this is the creator application that I was talking about. So within my application, this is sort of like a library that I'm maintaining. So it has access to a huge collection of books that I have created a huge repository, and it has like thousands, I think 13,000 or 14,000 books available inside the list, and it has the ratings from for all of these books as well, and the author name, and there are multiple other things available here. So you can actually search for a book here. Let's say I'm searching a particular book. As soon as I select a particular book, it auto populates. As soon as I search for a book and I select that particular book, it gives me the ID and author and the rating for that book and the total number of pages. And now I can select and I had something. I don't want to get into detail with all of them, but I had my own workflows based on that. So I can select ongoing, and if I mention like there are totally 303 pages, so let's say I am at 127 page, and if I click on enter, the data is added here, and it tells me this is you have finished this much percentage of the book or something like that. So this was an application that I created. Now you can assume it to be like a business requirement. So this is something I felt would you'll be able to relate with. But when we talk about business requirements, any business requirement, especially with an application like Zoho Creator, when you are creating something inside that, you should have the ability to access the data which is available here, and also modify the data which is available here, and also create new data as well. So you should have or delete data. There are multiple other possibilities. So now what we are going to do is, as you can see, this is my application. So what we will try to do is access the data which is available in that particular application. So I have already created, so this is the URL. So wherein the URL will talk about the application, API, and the user, or the one who's the owner of the application, and the name of the application, and it is inside a report and the name of the report. So this gives you a very good idea of what exactly we are looking for. So this points exactly to the application that I just showed you, or the report that I showed you. So this report is what we are currently looking at. We are exactly looking at this report. So you might want to just take a look at the books or something available here, because we will be pulling the data for this from within Zoho QEngine itself. So the next step is to check the connection. So the connection is already made. I'm just going to select that connection, and I'll save this API request, and I'll run the API request now. So now what happens is it is pulling data from, there are no assertions present, as you can clearly see that I didn't add any assertions, but I'll just make it pretty. Now, as you can see here, I had two different categories for my books. One was ongoing and another one is finished, or I marked it as read. So all of that is available here. We'll be starting off with these books and the titles and everything. Everything is available inside the JSON. And so this is exactly what I was talking about when I said you could fetch records and you could modify them, or it's easier for you to pull data just like that. You don't have to enter a particular application like a creator application to get the data, wherein you can get it from the terminal itself or from a different application once the connection is set. So this is exactly what I was talking about. And this is exactly how most of your applications, let it be a web application or a mobile application, work. So I hope that was clear. So now I think there is a bit more time. So I hope you understood this part. So this is the data that we pulled from here. You have access to everything. As you can see here, everything is available as a key value pair, like the number of pages, the rating, and everything. Whatever you see here is available here. Okay, so now let's take it one step further. So what we will do now is I've already created a particular thing. So what we will try to do right now is to add a data. So you can see that in ongoing, there are only 3 different books as of now, and you don't see a 4th book. So what we will do right now is from within our Zoho QEngine itself, we'll try to add a book. So in this case, we'll be changing it to, but it is not our it is not the report that we are looking at. We are going to add the data to our book list. We'll be adding it here. So this is the what to say. This is the form that we are looking at. Just take the. So this is the form that we are looking at, and Just quickly make a change here. Okay. And within the body, I'm adding the data that I was talking about. This is the data or the new entry that I'm planning to make. So I'll be adding it here. As you can see here, it talks about the book title. In this case, this is an ID from the record which I already have inside one of my records. And the status, I'm adding it as ongoing. I'm just adding a few data here, the status, the number of pages, and the page number that I'm currently or something like that. So with this, me save it and let me run the API request now. So it tells me that the data has been added successfully. So let's take a quick look at what happened to our. Yes, as you can see here, a new book has been added, Meditations, and it was not present before, but it is being added now. Okay, data has been added successfully. So this way you can actually also add records, or I just showed you how to add a record. You can also perform delete, or you can update data from which is already present here. Not just creator, any other application that you are working on using APIs, you can perform different kind of options using Zoho QEngine. But before we wind up, I just quickly want to show you one important thing because this was essential. So this, as I talked about continuous testing with Zoho QEngine, in fact, we keep getting queries about it. So we talk about continuous testing with Zoho QEngine for API requests, the continuous testing. As you can see here, inside the particular test case, or sorry, API request, inside this API request, whatever response you're getting, we have the variables option. So the variable option will actually take, since we don't have time, I'm not getting into doing it for our own case. But what happens is the variable will take value from within this response that you are getting. And these variables, as you can see the name here, link name and workspace name, so these are actually getting the values from the particular API responses or the particular API response for this API request, and we are passing it in the subsequent API request. As you can see here, the link name and workspace name that we got from the previous API request, we are actually passing it on as a part of the API request in the subsequent API request. So this will help you with API continuous testing. So I'll just quickly run that so that it's easier for you to visualize. So Zoho QEngine is capable of lot many things, and especially with API testing, as you can see, it is able to get a lot of things. As you can see here, the workspace name is Zilker Solutions, and the link name is Contacts. So that was added here as well. I mean, that was added to the API request, as you can see here, Zilker Solutions workspace name and the link name. I hope we'll wind up with that. I hope the session was fruitful to you.